Hey there! In today's video, we're going to talk about forced perspectives and leading lines, two really important tools that photographers have to bring depth to their photographs. It's a way to bring three-dimensionality to a two-dimensional photograph. And there's no place better to showcase this than here in Walt Disney World, Florida. So, without further ado, let's do this. Well, last week I had the opportunity to spend a long weekend in Walt Disney World with my family and grandkids. We've been coming here for years, and it never fails to amaze me the photographic opportunities that can be found on the Disney property. Now, this is not a coincidence, since Walt himself in the past and the present Imagineers at Disney are constantly creating, designing, and updating the parks in a way to enhance and influence the experience that is the magic of Disney. Today, I specifically want to talk to you about two techniques that are prevalent in the architectural designs of the parks, and I think are really useful techniques in everyday photographic composition. These are forced perspectives and leading lines. As many of you who follow me here know, while I've been taking photographs my entire life, it's only over the past 3 to 4 years that I've really seriously studied the art and technical aspects of photographic composition. While walking around the parks, I now can't help but notice the nuances that have been created by the architectural Imagineers that quite literally can be found in every detail and corner of the Disney properties. Forced perspective in Disney parks is a clever architectural technique used to make structures appear larger or smaller. It's all about manipulating visual perception to create an illusion of depth and size. Here's how it's done. Disney often scales down the upper levels of their buildings. For example, the Cinderella castle at Magic Kingdom looks towering and grand, but the upper levels really are built smaller and at smaller scales. The windows and bricks get smaller as they rise, tricking your eye into seeing more height than there actually is. As I walk down Main Street, not only is the castle scaled, but almost all of the buildings on Main Street are designed with a 1 to 7/8 to 1/2 scale, which means that as we look upward, the upper story, although appearing to be a normal-sized floor, from below, in fact, when we look up, is only half the size of the first floor, making room for only one of Snow White's 7 buddies to fit in it. This illusion draws your eyes up, making you believe the building is really bigger than it is, despite the fact that it really is much shorter and smaller. In fact, the buildings at California's Disneyland are even shorter, with the second floor there being 5/8 the dimension, because the castle in California's Magic Kingdom is smaller. And in fact, the Cinderella castle in Orlando is actually 100 feet taller than the Sleeping Beauty castle in Disneyland in California. Thus, the California Main Street needed to be smaller to create the illusion that the castle was even bigger. In addition, as we look down Main Street at the castle, the buildings closer to the entrance are designed to be just a bit wider angled, slowly declining in size and in angle as you go from the entrance towards the castle. The street also becomes just a bit smaller in width as we go the same direction, all of which creates that illusion that when walking into the park, that the castle is far off into the distance, and thus larger than it really is. In fact, the castle is only 189 feet tall, keeping it well below the 200-foot level cutoff, which would force it to have a red blinking beacon on top, which I'm sure Walt didn't want. But forced perspective gives it the illusion of being much bigger than it is. Interestingly, if I stand exactly in the middle of Main Street, the illusion of longer distance and greater height and depth remains. But if I turn towards the exit in the opposite direction, making the exit much closer and shorter than it really is. Also, the trees planted near the exit are much larger as well, all creating the illusion that the walk back to your resort is much shorter than it really is. There's no coincidence that Walt knew how tired people would be after a long day at the park, and he wanted them to feel that the distance to the exit of the park, even while waiting in a crowd, was shorter than it really is. Other elements of forced perspective include color and detail. By manipulating color and detail, the illusion of distance can be manipulated. When we look at a landscape mountain scene, for example, in real life, the distant mountains are much less saturated, and there is much less detail in the distance. That's how our eyes see it, and therefore it's how we perceive depth. When one oversaturates and sharpens all elements of a landscape photograph, it looks odd and loses the three-dimensional depth we strive for in a photograph. The same is true in the theme parks at Disney, where the architectural geniuses have used harsher, brighter, and sharper details in the foreground, while softer, less detailed elements are used towards the background, thus enhancing the illusion of distance. The Chateau Laurier Hotel in Ottawa, one of the most iconic landmarks in Canada, is depicted in Epcot's Canadian Pavilion using the same forced perspective techniques. If we look at the scene in Epcot without people in the scene, all of the techniques I've discussed come into play and give the appearance of greater depth and height. But in actuality, the building presented, with the aid of forced perspective, is looking as if it's 6 stories in height, but really it's only 3. The floors at the top of the structure are tiny compared to the bottom. The pathway leading up to the structure even has miniaturized lampposts, which also gives the illusion of depth. Now, if we add people back into the scene, we lose some of that illusion, since our brains know the height of people, and we can now compare this to what is presented before us. Still pretty cool, I think. Similarly, in the animal kingdom, Mount Everest, Expedition Everest, is created with less saturation and detailed images at the top of the mountain, giving depth and scale to the mountain, an illusion of being huge and way in the distance in the Himalayas. The attraction uses forced perspectives to make the mountain appear much taller and steeper than it really is. The illusion is crafted by the strategic arrangement of shrubs and trees closer to the peak, as well as the buildings and structures that are around it. The illusion, however, fades once we see a man-made structure such as a roller coaster jutting out from the mountain. Also, the Beast's Castle in Fantasyland uses forced perspective to appear grand and distant. The structure is really relatively small, but its placement on a rocky hill along with strategic scaling makes it look imposing and far away. Another interesting illusion is utilized with the Great Sphere in Epcot on Spaceship Earth. Though not about height, the perception of size is enhanced through its distinct geodesic shape and the detailed, gradually changing sizes of silver panels covering the structure. There's no better place to see the magic of forced perspective than Star Wars Land in Hollywood Studios. The Imagineers have added a cast of characters to bring realism to this truly sci-fi fantasy. Walking onto the deck of the Death Star with a battalion of stormtroopers in front of a life-size hangar, well, that really helps with the illusion throughout the Rise of the Resistance ride. And it's a thrill for any Star Wars fan like myself. The mock-up of the Millennium Falcon is also life-size, thus giving credence to the illusion of the Tatooine Mountains beyond it, that appear massive, but in reality are really quite small. I had the ability to capture this amazing scene after hours at the park with my tripod, and I was able to utilize some real captures of a lunar eclipse taken back home in Jersey to create a compelling composite adding to the illusion of a truly out-of-this-world scene.
Don't play innocent with me. Your skills are the result of discipline and training. Very well.
Paths are also part of the illusion. Disney uses winding paths to make the area seem more expansive, making you feel like there's more distance and more to explore, enhancing the sense of discovery. This technique can be used as well in photographs to evoke greater depth and distance, giving the viewer a chance to explore the photograph as if it's a three-dimensional view. Try doing this in your compositions by choosing a curved path within your composition that lead the viewer's eyes into the scene. Everywhere you turn in Disney, there's leading lines. It is just amazing, especially as a photographer, understanding what it is to see these everywhere I go. Leading lines in photography are powerful compositional elements that guide the viewer's eye through an image, enhancing its visual impact. Here's how they can improve photographs. Leading lines naturally draw attention to the main subject, directing the viewer's gaze from one part of the image to another. This creates a visual path that can lead to an area of interest, ensuring that the viewer notices what the photographer wants to highlight. By converging towards a vanishing point, leading lines can create the illusion of depth and three-dimensionality in a two-dimensional image. This makes a photograph more immersive, giving the viewer a sense of being part of the scene. Leading lines can convey a sense of motion across an image. Whether straight, curved, or diagonal, all of these lines lead the viewer's eye along a path, suggesting motion and dynamism in an otherwise still frame. Leading lines also help in structuring a photograph, providing balance by organizing the elements within the frame. This can make the image feel more stable and aesthetically pleasing. Leading lines add visual interest and can make a photo more engaging. They encourage exploration, urging the viewer to look beyond the immediate subject and delve into the entire scene. Different types of lines actually evoke different emotions. For example, horizontal lines can create a sense of calm. Vertical lines suggest strength, and diagonal lines convey dynamism and excitement. These benefits make leading lines an essential tool for photographers aiming to create compelling compositions. Whether found in natural landscapes or urban environments or walking around Disney, they can transform ordinary scenes into the extraordinary by adding structure and depth. Another way to evoke motion and leading lines in a photograph is by utilizing a wide-angled lens. The distortion afforded by the lens leads the viewer into the scene, since objects in the bottom of the shot are larger and become smaller as we get further from the bottom. Overall, walking around Walt Disney World is a photographer's playground. If you get the chance to go, make sure to take those perfunctory pictures of the family, since it really will mean a lot to them, especially as they get older and have kids of their own. But also, look around for the photographic opportunities that are right in front of you, and you'd be amazed at what you come up with, as well as how it can improve your own compositions in everyday life. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please give a thumbs up and subscribe below. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for me to hear from you in the comments. Till next time.